I think one of the coolest names in ultra running is the High Lonesome. I think it's a name that is a nice nod to like mountain music and what happens in the mountains, and bluegrass music being like the High Lonesome vibe. And I learned a lot about this race from Bri today. It was really cool to have her on. She ran it. It was her first 100-miler, and when you hear her recount the story of it, you would think it's a pretty wild choice for a first 100-miler. So kudos out of the gates to Bri for having the grit and the tenacity to go after such an awesome big vibe of a race. Learned a ton. Had no idea about so many elements of this, the Sawatch Mountains, how close it is to some other iconic races, but how it really has developed its own identity. Leadville is its own thing. Hard Rock is its own thing. And High Lonesome, a very young race, relatively speaking, has already carved out its own place, an obvious place in those big Southern Colorado mountain races. Before we get there, though, if you have been enjoying the podcast, if you enjoyed this episode, if you wouldn't mind just clicking follow, that helped me a ton. Also, we have a new documentary out. It's episode 4 of Trail Grit. It's the story of the Zion 100-miler. Pretty stoked on it. Incredibly stoked on it, actually. Hope you'll check that out. I'll put that in the show notes as well. Without any further ado, though, here's my new friend, Bri. The hard part of season 3 of the podcast, of all of these races, is that now like my bucket list has expanded significantly of races I either want to run or at the very least spectate. And the purpose of this season is to, there's more races than my body would ever allow me to run. And so it's just fun to talk about them and talk about them with people who have ran them or are training for them. I know that in ultra media, there's a bias to the Western United States, but it's really hard because there's just such great races. And I know if you're listening on the East Coast, or if you're in Europe, Australia, New Zealand, anywhere that you're at, I know that you would say the same thing for where you are. And that's ultimately what I'm trying to do. But it's unavoidable to highlight some of these Western United States races. Even though the episode that released today is the Sörmlands 100 in Sweden, and that is probably the top of my bucket list now. I want to go do that race really bad. We've done the Yeti on the East Coast. We've done No Business 100. I've got plenty more coming from other countries and all over the East. But today we're just going to settle into the West, and we're going to enjoy hearing about the High Lonesome 100, which my friend Chuck Conopa first put on my radar. He ran it year 1 of High Lonesome, which was maybe 2015. And ever since then, just because I'm a bluegrass music fan, I know that High Lonesome is actually the name of bluegrass, a type of bluegrass. And so that was pretty cool. And so it felt like down home, felt like country, mountainy, all that sort of stuff. And so today I'm excited to do a deep dive with, I would say, a new in-person friend, but an old social media friend, Bri Sullivan. Bri, welcome. Thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks so much. I was so excited when you reached out to me, just to be on the podcast so we could actually talk in person.
Yeah,
and
right.
Then B, especially about High Lonesome, because this holds a very special place in my heart. It was my first 100-miler, and I have a lot to say about it, but all around super excited to be here with you.
That's perfect. I mean, let's jump in, and we'll learn about you in the context really of High Lonesome and how you arrived at it. But I first just want to let's hit some of the high points of High Lonesome. Where's it at?
Yeah, so it's situated around Salida and Buena Vista, Colorado. And it's just one of the most gorgeous areas that I've been to. And honestly, I had actually never visited that area before I went to go and scout the course and do the race. But yeah, I love Colorado. I spent a lot of time in the San Juans and stuff ahead of that. Okay. And when I decided I wanted to do a 100-miler, I just said, I want it to be high alpine. I want to see beautiful things. And if I'm going to suffer and maybe die out there, I want it to be the most gorgeous place I've ever been.
Close to heaven. Yeah. You're way up there, right? And the altitude's super high.
Yeah. There's a reason it's called High Lonesome. It's you hit the highest point of the race within the first 15 miles of the race at it's almost 13,000 feet. So it's high.
Wow. I mean, that one of the things I've learned going through all of these races so far is that my geography is absolute garbage. So help me out here. So I know Buena Vista. I've been to Buena Vista actually a handful of times. Are you in the Collegiate Peaks area?
You're next to it. Yeah. So it's a little more south than the Collegiates, but still within that similar range profile. And yeah, it's just the most magnificent area. You know, you just like look all around and it's just these huge like 14ers, 13ers, like just you're all encased in there. And it's truly one of the most beautiful courses I've ever seen. When I got done, I said, this is, I think, the only course I've ever been on where like there isn't a part that I would have like been like, oh, we could have done without that. Like usually you get to a course and you're like, well, like, you know, that was kind of boring or whatever. And there is not a single part of that race, even on Jeep roads, you're looking around, you're like, this is the most gorgeous scenic view I've ever seen. Yeah, it was stunning.
What's the total elevation?
It's 24,000 feet, and it's all over 10,000 feet. So it's a high race.
So I know that you've got a history of ultra running, but for your first, I know you said because you want to die somewhere beautiful. That's a wild first race to be over 10,000 feet in elevation, 24,000 feet of gain. Why? Other than wanting to die somewhere beautiful, I guess. Well, maybe not. You've said that. How was it?
Yeah, I honestly, it was super hard. It was really, really hard. I was out there for 36 hours, so it was a really long race for me. And I had other things. It's like 38 or something like that. It's a very generous cutoff, but I was definitely like struggling. And I had like health complications as well. So I wasn't going into it like, you know, 100% super powered. I was super proud just to even be able to be out there and like moving in that space, and like getting to that goal was really valuable for me and important. But it was truly the hardest thing I've ever done, and also the most rewarding thing I've ever done. And I chose it specifically because I knew I wanted to challenge myself, and I really love like a high altitude and like vert races. So like I've done Tushers and like Never Summer and other races that are like, you know, more like endurance, more climbing and descending. And that's kind of where I like to be. So whenever I was looking at race profiles, that also really intrigued me, where I was like, oh, I'm just going to be like looking at beautiful wildflowers for a day and a half or whatever. And that compelled me even more. And then when I learned about the race directors, that really enriched it too.
Okay. Yes, I want to get to that because I have a lot of questions. I'm very curious.
Yeah.
But real quick, you mentioned Tushers. I know of Tushers because of Matt Gunn, who started it, and then Aravipa, who carries the torch. What is Never Summer that you mentioned?
Never Summer is closer to like Fort Collins, Colorado, in the Never Summer Wilderness, and they have a 60K and 100K option. And I did their 60K. And again, it's like a little higher altitude, really beautiful lakes and stuff like that. I just feel like that's kind of my sweet spot. Not necessarily that I like perform well there, but that's what I like. And I feel like
you're safe here. I get
it. Like I mentally enjoy being in those spaces. It brings me a lot of joy, and the views are things that I really value. So that's truly what like led me to the High Lonesome Ultra sign up page. And then I felt kind of safe because it was a lottery. And so I was like, oh, maybe I won't get in. Like I'll put my name in. And like, I'll take that first step, but maybe I just like won't get in.
It's a very non-committal commitment. I totally get it. It's like I put in for Wasatch and I was like, and I got it. And it's like, shit.
Yeah. And I said, like, I was like, okay, if my name gets called on the lottery, I'll know if I want to do this or not. Like, I'll either be afraid and excited, or I'll be afraid and like, no, I need to pull my name. And when my name got pulled, I was like, I'm going to do it. I'm excited. I'm intrigued. Like, let's see what I can do. So.
Okay. So I want to contrast the few things I know about you. You've got, you like this big vert, this big up and down, these sort of like quad crushing efforts, but are you from Arizona?
So Southern? I'm actually originally from the Midwest. So I grew up in Illinois, and then I moved out to Arizona after college, and I was there for 9 years. So I like to say, I mean, Arizona feels like home at that point. So I was in Arizona in the Phoenix area for 9 years and had like started a trail running group there. And that's kind of how I got linked up with Women of the Wasatch here in Utah. So like when I moved here almost 2 years ago now, I was able to have a community built in when I got here. So
got it. So
none of my background is in high vertical things. I think
that's where I'm going.
Like, and I wasn't raised running.
Yeah. Okay. So your formative years of let's call them formative years of in Phoenix area, that you were hot desert running, right? Basically.
Yeah, which was never my strong suit. Like I'm not good in the heat, so I was waking up at like 4:30 every day to run by 5 so that we were, missing the sun before it would burn you to death. But I do think it makes you like very strong and very resilient as a runner to like be running in the desert, because you do have to like adapt so much around like the heat and different like variations with no shade, having to really dial in a lot of your like hydration and nutrition, and also just the mental capacity it takes to do like repeats up a mountain to get the vertical gain you want, or like yo-yoing a bunch. I think it just like aided to a lot of things, but I did spend a lot of time elsewhere. So like every summer I would like go to Flagstaff more. I went to like Mammoth Lakes. I would go to Colorado and try to be in other places that were less hot and honestly like just terrains I really enjoyed. So I always kind of knew that I didn't want to stay in Phoenix long term. It was really hard to leave the community, but I knew that like ecosystem wise, terrain wise, environment wise, I always knew I wanted to be by big mountains. That was something in my heart. It just like always called to me. So
were you running a lot of Aravaipa races when you were down there?
A ton. Yeah. I was very deeply like ingrained with Aravaipa. Like when I first got into trail running, it was through like the Aravaipa group runs, and they were the first people to kind of like introduce me to what trail running even was. Cause I didn't know about that growing up in the Midwest at all. And so, like they were very integral, and like they still are. Like the Aravaipa entity itself is like so enriched into like my DNA of who I am as a trail runner. And like even going down for Cocodona recently, it was like a reunion. You get to see everybody, and the way that they put on races is incredible. Like they've done such a good job as an entity. And like I think that that's something I pay attention to a lot too when I go to other races and like other entities, to be like, oh, what are they doing? And kind of comparing, even though they're different. But that was also something that like with High Lonesome, I was like, man, they are so dialed. They nail it. The experience is so solid that like, even when I got done, I was like, I want to come back and do it again, because I just love what they've done in the space of like Buena Vista. They bring in a lot of like local vendors, and like the finish line reward is so cool. And it's just, they've really nailed it. Like when I look at Aravaipa versus like, the High Lonesome team and what they've done, I'm like, they're just like top notch. They do such a good job. So is if you're going to run High Lonesome, is lodging Buena Vista, is it that close to Buena Vista, or is it just like, is that a good reference point, or like, is that the starting line? It's really close. So the house we had, like for my crew and stuff, I rented an Airbnb, and our Airbnb was like 15 minutes from the start line. So it's really, really close to like, like kind of in between Salida and Buena Vista. And then like the whole race kind of like goes along, not necessarily like the interstate, but like you could hop off to go to like the different crew stations from that main highway. So it's like very kind of like back into the mountains, but close to both of those towns.
Yeah. So I think it's iconic. It's an iconic area for a lot of reasons, but also to note for other people who aren't great at geography, just up the road is Leadville, not too far. You got the Leadville 100. And then, so how far is Hard Rock? Do you know?
Oh man, Hard Rock is, I'd have to look. I didn't do my research on this before we got
Do you know
here.
Let's see, Hard Rock.
So I was going to say, because Silverton to...
Oh, Silverton is the name of the town? Okay.
Yeah, to like Salida.
Okay, Silverton.
It's like 4 hours and 40 minutes apart from one another, because like Salida is more north.
Oh, you're right. My goodness.
East.
Yeah. So Colorado always surprises me. So I'm from West Texas, and we'd go skiing in either New Mexico or Pagosa Springs or something like that.
Yeah.
And Denver, Denver's close, is to me is more like Omaha than it is like a mountain town. Like all these mountain towns, you're like, that's so far from Buena. It's so far from, when you got Buena to Salida, like, and you're in the Sawatch. Is it the Sawatch Mountains for High Lonesome?
Yes.
So you're down there in the Sawatch, and then you're still 4 hours and 45 minutes away from Hard Rock, and then you're in the San Juans, which is like the closest thing we have to the Alps.
Yeah.
As much as I hate to admit it, Colorado is awesome.
It is. And it's like, it's the place like in my heart that, you know, if we were to ever pick up and like leave Salt Lake, I'm like, we want to go to like Buena Vista because it's it's such a mecca. Like the mountains there are amazing. You can still access like the San Juans and stuff too, but like you have everything there available to you as well. I really fell in love with it when I was there because I went out about like a month and a half ahead of the race and I scouted the course too so I could know what I was getting into. And just like being there for like a week and getting to go into the local restaurants and the stores and stuff, I was like, man, this is like a really amazing place. And I just love the idea of bringing more people into that town too and like supporting what they do, like all of the local vendors and stuff like that. I don't know.
Do you know the coffee shop? There's probably multiple, but there's one main one that comes to mind that I always went to, and it's been so long since I've been there. But it's like
in Salida or Buena Vista?
Buena Vista.
Was it like a rabbit, like something? I don't know. There was one that I was going to all the time to work out of, and it was so good. Yeah,
I could see it in my mind, but I can't think of it.
It was on like a corner.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. I wonder if it's the same place. I really enjoyed it, but
me too.
Was it Brown Dog?
I'm gonna look it up. You know, there's no shame. I know so little, and I don't mind just searching. Let's see. Where are we? Buena Vista coffee shop. I think Brown Dog.
Yeah, because that's where I was going a lot, and I really loved it. It was so, I don't know, friendly and social. I felt like I could meet people. I was going in there multiple times, and people would be like, oh, like, you got this yesterday. Do you want the same thing? And I'm like, I love that.
I mean, so this is what's fun. Like I was talking yesterday with Tim Tollefson about Mammoth Trail Fest. And it's just like when we talk about European ultras, we romanticize like, oh, you know, you're in non-UTMB. Let's even take Surmlands, for example. One of the cool things about Surmlands is that when you're running through these Swedish, 100 miles through this, just an hour south of Stockholm, his aid stations, he said a lot of them are actual restaurants. And the race director is a former Michelin star chef who was at Noma for a little bit in Copenhagen, St. John in the UK. And it's like this food, and I romanticize it like, oh, these going through those small towns. But the reality of hearing Mammoth or hearing about this and Buena and Salida, and we have it too. It's just, and it's actually quite similar. So to hear you talk about like, oh, it's so cool, the small town, I'm thinking, well, this is exactly what my conversation was like with Billy White in Sweden. So maybe it's important to note that we do have it. It's just sometimes we just romanticize Europe. Yeah.
And I think it's just like finding that, like I always, when I go to new places that I haven't been to, it's like, I always kind of want to romanticize that experience, especially like around a race where it's like, this is special. And like, I haven't been here. Like what does this bring me, like the environment or the community, the locality, like all of these people that are super excited to be out, like, and we'll talk more about the course, but like there were parts of like the start line and the finish line where people were like outside their houses, like cheering you on. And like when you pass, they're like out there, and like that's a highlight of their year for you to be out there and like witnessing that. And I don't know, that's like, it's different than Europe, but like we also have that if we like look for it when and
we have an American version of it. And it's you know, fantastic. So if a great race is really a combination of a great course and a well-run, you know, sort of operation, that points me to the race directors. You said that was something that put it on your radar. What is it about them that you like?
Man. So I didn't know a ton until I started researching 100 milers. And then once I started, I like looked at their Instagram, and I had kind of been talking to like Tara Warren. She's in Ogden, and she had done it like 3 or 4 different times at that point. And she really just like could not stop raving about Caleb and his wife, Cassie, and like how organized they are and stuff, but also how passionate they are. And they actually created it. High Lonesome now is a 50-50 split. So it's 50% women on the start line. And that is huge to me. Whenever I was out there, it was actually a physical thing that I was reacting to. When I looked around, I was like, I see so many women. I'm surrounded by women doing this 100-mile race. So many of us were first-time 100-mile chasers. And there was something about that of like, this was the first race environment I had been in where I looked around and there were more women than men, like around me at most times. And it just felt very empowering and exciting. And like,
I bet.
When I was around women, like we would just have very similar conversations, or like we would be thinking about things in the same way. And that meant a lot to me, to have that space and for them to be kind of paving the way, you know, of like bringing more women to start lines, bringing more diversity to start lines. Like that really stood out to me. And it definitely like propelled me towards like wanting to put my name in for the lottery. And then they also host a trail work weekend. It's one of the requirements that you do trail work before the race. With a lot of 100-milers, that's pretty standard. But they hosted like a camp out weekend, and everybody was camping together and getting to spend time around the campfire, like with the RDs and stuff, and just getting to know them more on like a personal level really stood out to me. And it ended up that like in my low point in the middle of the night during High Lonesome, I ran into Caleb at Purgatory aid station, which was like, I don't even know, it's like 65 miles in, and I was just so low. And I tried to tell him I wanted to drop, and he was like, absolutely not. I know who you are. You're going to keep going. Like, this isn't the end for you. And it just built this like more familiarity, like a personal relationship to them that I haven't really had like with other race entities or anything like that, especially like going somewhere that I don't live in that state. It's not like I would see them frequently outside of that weekend. And like, I just feel like they're very intentional and they care a lot to get to know like who's coming to do their races. And for me, that like really stands out. Yeah.
Does Scout Mountain do that as well?
Yeah. So they're actually they do a lot of conversations, and they're like really close with Luke Nelson and his wife. And like, they do a lot of like brainstorming together around like,
fun.
How do we further the trail running space? What does this look like? And I know that like Luke and his team have talked a lot, even with like Women of the Wasatch, about like, hey, like we want to support even more of like these ladies from Salt Lake coming up to do Scout and stuff. Like there's a lot of really awesome correlations there. And I'm about to go do Scout 50K in 2 weeks because I want to go support what they're doing. So that's a big reason as to like why I pick races too, is when I'm like, man, like these are people that are really intentional and they really do want to like move the sport forward in so many ways. And like, that really has stuck out to me.
And it looks like, I think I saw in there that Luke is running High Lonesome this summer.
Yeah. I saw that too.
Yeah.
I'm so excited for like to follow along. I have a lot of FOMO. I like wish I was going back out. Really? I put my name back in this year, and then I got into Wasatch and they charged my card immediately. And I was like, okay, I'm going to have to wait, but I do want to go back and do High Lonesome again.
Yeah. You know, so that's fun. Here's another connection then. You're doing Wasatch this year. I just had some Instagram engagement with Jimmy Elam. I don't know him beyond Instagram. But it looks like his A race this year is Wasatch, and the connection is it looks like I think he's the course record holder at High Lonesome as well.
Yeah,
just under 19 hours.
We have a running joke that like everything Jimmy does, I end up doing too.
Oh, really?
At like a very different level. But yeah, so like he did High Lonesome the same year as me, and I just remember going up like 10 Cup Pass, and I'm like dying, and he just looks like he just started, and I was like, oh my gosh, we were on like totally different playing fields. But
I said this exact thing when I talked with Tim Tolfson. He was so nice. He was calling me a runner as well. I was like, no, I say that I run, and you also run, but we are not the same. Let's not confuse.
We have very different race experiences.
And that Chico State cross country churned out Jimmy, Tim Tolfson, and Anthony Casales. So crazy. Such a crazy program. They all look so happy at like mile 80 and 90 and whatever. And it's insane. I'm happy for them. I'd give anything to be that. So if you hear jealousy, or if you hear like the bitterness is not critical, it's like, it's pure jealousy. I would love to be happy.
I could relate. Yeah. When I was out on course and he like pranced by me, I was like, you are kidding me right now.
He will have had a full night's rest, a cup of coffee, and everything by the time you're at mile 80. I get it.
Yes. Yeah. But it truly was like so inspiring also, because that course is so hard, and like 100%. Being able to see him moving so well and like operating in such a high level, I was like, wow, that inspires me to kind of like see what I'm capable of when I'm healthy, and like when I am at the point that I can get out there and like move the way I think I'm capable of. Like it was really cool to be out there with him, and I'm sure I'll have not the same experience at Wasatch because there's no out and back, so I won't ever see him, but it'll be fun to hear how it goes.
Yeah. So now take me to the starting line. For you, I mean, what time did it start? You know, what was the vibes? What was going through your head? You know?
Yeah, it's a 5 a.m. start time, and you're like in this field off of it's like a highway. So they start you on the top of this mountain, this overlook basically, in a field, and they have you in the corral. And like, I was just so anxious. Like I was super nervous and I didn't really sleep the night before. And I think that's pretty standard part of the course that your brain just like doesn't really turn off. But yeah, I was just really anxious, but I also had like friends around me. So Morgan Olson, she's also in Women of the Wasatch, and she was doing it as well. And so we found each other at the start line, and we didn't have a plan to really run together or anything, but I was like, oh, like, let's at least like go out the gate together. And like, if we separate, we separate. But we actually ended up running most of the race together, which was awesome. And yeah, so like we saw the sunrise, they had us sent off, and we go down a paved like highway onto a road that goes kind of into a neighborhood. And then you branch off onto a Jeep road. And so it's like a kind of a steep descent to start, and everybody's kind of flying. You're excited. Your nerves are going. And I just had to keep telling myself, like, you don't need to be up there. Like, you need to just sit back and relax. Like, this is a long day, a long trek, and like, you don't know what's ahead. So I really like try to always keep myself corralled to not get swept up in the energy, because it is so easy when everybody's so excited. But yeah, like you're kind of on that, and then you branch off the Jeep road onto single track and have a little bit of a climb to start, but you're already at like 8,000 feet. Like you start around 8,000 feet. So it's like high to begin with, and you can definitely like, you know, feel that you're working a little bit. And then, you get onto single track and you're kind of like traversing through the forest. It's really beautiful. And like, I don't know, it's just very enclosed. Everyone's kind of quiet. You're just starting, and the separation's kind of already starting to happen. But like that first chunk, I was just trying to like remain calm, not like try to overdo it, and trying to process like, I'm going to be out here now for like a really long time. And you don't see your crew until a 50K. So like you don't see your crew until 30 or 31 miles or so. And so that was also something that I was like, okay, like I just need to wrap my brain around like being out here for quite a while, like by myself. I'm not going to see my people for quite a while. And like I had said originally, you go from the start line, you have one aid station at like mile 8 along that single track, kind of going through the forest. And then you start your climb up Antero. To Antero Pass, and that's like your high point of the race. Like you're at like 13,000 feet within.
What mile is that?
That's like mile. I have the profile up on the side. It's like mile 13, 12 or 13, and it's like 13,000 feet. So you go from 8 to like 13 in 13 miles.
So, I mean, psychologically, to me, I mean, it's always hard no matter when it comes, but it's kind of nice to knock that out at the beginning. Maybe. Yeah.
And I think I thought that initially, and like I had done that as part of like my scouting session that I did out there like a month earlier. So I like knew the climb that was coming. You go up like Little Browns, you go up, and it's like this big canyon kind of traverse, and like you're up in between these big mountains, and like you see like the snowpack melting out. There's waterfalls. It's like so beautiful. So I was really excited for that climb, and I knew what the pass was like and everything. So I was just trying to keep it easy, like take the pace very consistent, but not like stopping or anything, and trying to pay attention to my breathing. Because I had started to have some breathing issues when I did my scouting session. I think that I just overworked my lungs being up that high, and like we had a crazy snow year that year. So I wasn't able to get up to altitude in Salt Lake like at all. And so when I went up to train and do like my scouting sessions, I definitely felt like I was working really hard.
Was this the year of this was our oh man.
So like it wasn't melted out until like August. And so,
so you would have had an awesome training block, and you're living in a great area, good enough area. Nothing. Yeah. Oh, that's.
And I couldn't get up there. Yeah. So I was stressed about that during training, where I was like, oh my gosh, like I can't even get up, like, around Alta. I can't go do the Brighton Loop. I can't go up anywhere to get altitude training really at all. Yeah. So I ended up having some struggles during my scouting session around like, just high altitude and like labored breathing. And I ended up getting an inhaler before the start of the race, like 2 weeks out, because I was just having some trouble. And I didn't have experience using an inhaler before then. So got up to the high point at like mile 13, 14, and you start this descent. And then when you get down from the pass, it's a Jeep road down the backside, gorgeous views. It's so awesome. So you're like traversing and winding down this Jeep road, and then you get to your Antero aid station. And that's at about probably like mile 15 or so. I got there. I actually got to run a little bit of the course with Kelsey, Caleb's wife. She did it as well for her first year. So she was out there, and I got to talk to her a lot about like more women on start lines, like all this stuff. It was such a positive experience to like get to be out there with her and like sharing that. So I like stop at the aid station, got a little bit of food, and then it's a continued pretty steep descent before you get onto like this highway. And that's at about, I don't know, mile 20 or so that you hit this highway on the other side. And when I got there, I just like projectile vomited everywhere. And I've never thrown up ever. I've never thrown up training. I've never thrown up in a race. And it was like exorcism style. Like Morgan Olson was with me, and she was like, that was the craziest thing I've ever witnessed. And I think it was from taking
was it just once?
An inhaler. Just once. Yeah, just once. And it was very forceful.
Is it any photos or video or anything?
No, no, unless someone in a passing car got it, because like I was around like vehicles when this was happening. And it was just like out of nowhere. But I think it was because I was using an inhaler and I was up so high and like running downhill so steeply. I think it just like jostled my stomach and really set me up for success there. But at that point, like I don't see my crew for another 12 miles. And so I was like, I have nothing in my stomach and I can't see anybody. I'm going to be like alone. So I was very shaky and kind of stressed out, but I just like, I knew what the climb was that was coming to, because I had done that out when I was out there, and it's called Tin Cup Pass. And it's basically a yo-yo. So you go up this pass, it's on single track, and it is so pretty. It's really, really beautiful. You get up there, it's like sweeping views of all of the peaks around you. And then you go down the backside to your aid station, and then you turn around and go back up and over. And that's where I could see my crew. And so I was like, as long as I can just get to my crew, I can eat, I can get better, like get the support I need, and I can keep going. But I was really nervous about that. So sense. I was able to chip away at it, and like it was pretty warm this year. So like pretty toasty and exposed for a lot of parts. And then when you go up Tin Cup and down the backside, you're kind of enclosed in a forest, and it's a little humid, but flowing water along the whole thing. So I was getting into the water as much as possible. I was like wetting my hat, wetting my shirt, like trying to stay cool as much as I could, because I personally run really warm. So that was a nice tip for anybody who might want to do this race, that if it's a good year with a lot of snow, then like you'll have a lot of options for water access, which I really utilized and appreciated.
That on that note, and it never crossed my mind, in 10 plus years of trying for these, ultras, is that I was talking with Mike McMonagle, and he said one of the key things that he and Leah learned was this temperature control thing, like set them apart. So I haven't run a race since he has mentioned that. I have not ran a race since then, but to think like, you're just constantly trying to cool yourself, keep your temperature.
Yeah, I would put like ice in my hat. Ice in my hat, ice in my sports bra. Like I know myself well enough after living in the desert too, to know like how I operate in the heat and like even in the humidity, that as soon as I knew that I had access to like flowing water and stuff, I was always dunking my hat or like getting myself kind of wet to stay as cool as possible.
Are you above the tree line in this race at all? Like, are you super exposed?
Yeah, so Antero Pass, you're up really high. That's like for sure above tree line. but you're up there so early in the morning that usually I don't think that that's like a risk for storms most of the time, but like you have to be aware, obviously, that there is a risk. Luckily they put the aid station for Antero on the backside. So like you literally just go up and over, and like as soon as you go down the backside, you're back in the trees. And then Tin Cup is also above tree line. So that pass is above tree line as well. And then again, like you drop back down and you're in the trees pretty quickly. So there was never a point where I was above tree line and exposed for an amount of time that I felt uncomfortable. Like I felt like if storms were to roll in, there were a lot of places that there was an option to either like not climb up to the pass yet, or if you were up at the pass, you would just bomb down into the trees basically. But there are a lot of points throughout the race that you're above tree line.
Okay.
Crazy. Yeah.
So where did you pick up a pacer? You said you ran, and I apologize, you cut out as soon as you said the name. You said you ran most of the race with somebody.
Oh, yeah. I ran most of the race with Morgan Olson. She's also in Women of the Wasatch. And
she connected with Caleb?
Yeah, that's her husband.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that was her first 100-miler as well. And like we didn't plan it to run it together, but our paces ended up working, that we were with each other almost the entire time.
And so you both had
really
pacers too that joined you, so you two were running together and you had pacers with you?
Yeah, but we don't get a pacer until mile 50. So even when we see our crew for the first time after that, you're still solo for like another 20 miles. So it was kind of nice because I felt like I had somewhat of a built-in pacer with Morgan, but like when I got sick, when I threw up, I was like, just go ahead, I'll find you. Like if it works out that we realign, we can, but we were definitely both under the understanding that like neither of us wanted to like hold one another's race back at any point. So, so like we ended up reconnecting at probably mile 35 or 36. Like she left the crew station before I did at Tin Cup, and then she was already out past the climb, but I saw her again on the way to Hancock, which was mile 50. And again, you're like on a Jeep road and some single track. It's more technical, kind of bouldery terrain and everything. And then it kind of leads into this stunning single track section that like takes you back and onto this like vista overlooking a big mountain range. That's kind of where we were going to be seeing our sunset. So I caught her around there and we just navigated into Hancock together. And by the time that we got into Hancock, it was like dusk. So the sun was starting to set, and that's when you get your first pacer is there.
Nice.
And notoriously, and it was told to us in every like session meeting, the night section is the hardest section. You're going to get to the head wall. It's going to be horrible. And I was like, okay, yeah, whatever. They're saying this. It can't be that bad. And literally, I felt like my soul was being crushed. Like it was so hard.
This is when you leave mile 50?
Yeah. So from mile 50, you go from Hancock to Lost Wonder Hut, which is like this backcountry ski hut chalet that they use as an aid station. Nice. And from Hancock to there, it's fine. I actually had expected it to be a lot colder in the nighttime, and it wasn't. It was pretty humid. I felt really warm most of the night, but it's like big boulders and kind of like technical terrain and stuff. So that was hard to navigate. Like at night when you're tired, your eyes are kind of exhausted at that point. But it wasn't bad. And then from Wonder Hut to Purgatory is this climb that they call the head wall. And so when you're going up it, it's very, very steep. It's, I don't know like what the actual gain is of that like climb that you're doing, but all I can remember is it being like very big step ups, big bouldery steps, and like lots of technical terrain.
Like are you using your hands some too? Like
a little bit,
all fours?
Yeah. Not all fours, but like definitely like, you're kind of scrambling and getting your balance and everything. And it's just steep and dark and you're so tired. And you look up at this climb and all you see are headlamps of like everyone in front of you. And you can see how far you have to go. And it's high altitude too. So I'm looking at this and I think it's like you're at 11,000 or so. And then you're heading up and the head wall is again over 12,000 feet. And so like you're working really hard and you're tired, and like everything that happens, you're just like, why is that boulder there? Why does this have to be there? Like, this is so painful.
Cursing all of creation. Yeah.
Yeah. And you finally get up to the top of this summit, and you look out and you can see the lights of Purgatory aid station, but they look so far away, and they never get closer. They never get closer, and you're like, what is happening? I can't go anymore. And so honestly, this is funny, like looking back at the profile of the race now, because I'm like, oh, no wonder I felt so bad, because I was over 12,000 feet again trying to run, because when you get up to the top, it's like runnable. And I didn't feel like I could run it. And I was like, I don't understand what's happening. Like, I feel
not
defeated.
Enough oxygen.
Yeah. So this is funny, like looking back now, and I'm like, this makes so much sense.
Well, you've just hit on my two least favorite things in an ultra is when you can see headlamps ahead of you, because I'm so competitive, and it's an irrational competitiveness. I got second to last at Zion. Like, I'm not competitive. I'm dying to be competitive in this sport. I am not. But when I see headlamps really far ahead of me, it's not the doom of what's ahead of me. It's the frustration that I'm not ahead of those people. So when I see those headlamps, it's like, it's irrational, especially later in the race. It's like, no, I should be up there. And then my second least favorite thing is when you can see an aid station at night from like 6 or 7 miles out. Those are the two things that are really soul crushing. Yeah.
And like mentally, that was like my the hardest mental space I've ever been in a race was like that section. And it was my boyfriend who was pacing me. So bless his heart. He was so wonderful and like able to manage where my headspace was. But like I had very similar, like my self-talk was just really tough at that time too. And I was like, gosh, like, why can't I move faster, like more efficiently up this climb? We have climbs similar to this in Salt Lake. This doesn't make sense. Like, why am I struggling this bad? And like over my poles, like feeling so much pain, my body really hurt. I was like, this is just so demoralizing of like not being able to move the way I felt like I could move. And like getting up to the top and then like seeing that aid station, I just like lost it. I was like, there's no way. And it's never getting closer. Like every mile we would go, I was like, have we even moved at all? This is so crazy. Right. Yeah. And so you roll into Purgatory, which is a very
Purgatory ski station. Is this the ski area?
So I don't think this is a ski area. I think this is just what they're. Let me go look. I feel like I
because it's not far from there that there's like Purgatory Mountain or something like that. It's where people in Lubbock, Texas, would go ski a lot.
So yes,
that's in Durango.
There's the Lost Wonder Hut aid station, which is like a backcountry ski, and there is a ski run at Purgatory. So like the aid station is at a ski location, but it would be near. It's not the Purgatory that we're thinking of in like Durango.
Yes, correct.
It's a different ski resort, but there is a Purgatory. There's like ski runs by that aid station. So there is a ski resort there. Yes.
But Purgatory it's aptly named for the race as well. It's like you're not quite in hell, but but it's inevitable.
It is. But you feel like you kind of are. And it's near, so like Monarch Pass is where the ski resort is. So like Purgatory is like part of Monarch. And so I get to Purgatory. That's where I tried to drop. I was like, I don't want to go any further. And then
how did you
Caleb,
get to, so this was
like,
Caleb was
no,
there.
You can't drop. Yes. So the race director was there. He had met me at the trail maintenance weekend and like had known of me. And I looked at him and I was like, I'm not going any further from here. And he was like, yes, you are. You're not staying here. You're not going to sit and like stop here. Like you have more in the tank. You're going to keep going. And this
goes back to my season 1 topic was late race survival. Like, how do you survive the late race urge to quit? In which Elsa, she was my first interview of the whole podcast. How did you do it then? I mean, when you're convinced that you're going to quit, are you externally motivated? Was Caleb able to say something that helped you? How did you keep going?
That's a good question. Because like, I feel like I'm very internally motivated. Like I have like such a strong why of like why I'm out there and like what my goals are and like what's going to keep me going. And like, that was the deepest pain cave I've ever been in, of like discomfort and like feeling like I can't fathom going another 40 miles. Like, I don't know how this looks for me that I would keep going. And I wasn't chasing cutoffs or anything at this point. I didn't have anything that I was like stressed about that I was going to like not make it, and like time wise or anything. I was just so defeated, like down, and like hadn't been eating super well. Like, there was just a lot of stuff that was going on. And like I had said before, like, I just wasn't healthy going into the race. So it felt like everything was that much harder. And yeah, so I listened to Caleb, and Caleb was like, you have more in you than you think you do. And I've seen so many people in this space, like wanting to drop here, and you'll regret it if you drop here. And also it's really hard to get you out because it's super far away. He's like, you can't drop here.
And completely separate. I can't get you out of here.
Yeah, he was like, you could, but it would be a bad time. And so, you know, he's like, the sun's going to come up soon, and you're going to feel different than you feel right now. And like that had been what my partner was saying too. He's like, you need to remember that like every 100-miler comes with these ebbs and flows. Like, you're going to feel almost like manic, where like sometimes you're feeling really good, and then 5 minutes later you feel really bad. And like, that's part of the game, is being able to kind of like ebb and flow with these stages and phases that you go through. And I just kept trying to think of like, okay, how can I visualize myself on the other side of this? Like, will I actually feel better than I do right now? And all I kept saying was like, okay, fine, I'll keep going. And it's just one foot in front of the other. And eventually I'm going to get to like my crew again. And if I still feel bad, I'll reassess there. And that was kind of my mentality, was like, all right, I'll leave here and I'll keep going. But if I feel bad at Monarch, I think I have to like reconsider. And I just remember like getting through the rest of the night section, and I'm a pretty peppy, talkative person, and I was so quiet. And I was just like, I just need to like just one foot in front of the other, one foot in front of the other. And we finally did like watch the sun come up after Monarch, or before Monarch Pass. You kind of go up on top of this overlook basically before you kind of traverse and single track down to the road, which is what you kind of go up to get to Monarch Pass aid station. And I was like, okay, like fresh day. I made it through. That was really, really hard, but like maybe I do have a little bit more that I can give. And
I was like pacing
really
you at this point?
It was still my boyfriend, Sean, at that point. So he did like 26 miles or so with me, 50 to like 60, 50 to 68 or something like that. So like 20 or so. And he definitely got the worst of it. It was like really, really hard. But it helped because he has a lot of 100-mile experience. And I felt like it was
I was at
really
Aunt Knowles
beneficial.
at Wasatch the year that he won Wasatch. I was at Aunt Knowles watching him come through at
looks amazing.
Like so like, damn it.
I know.
Anyway,
I know.
Great runner.
He was just like thriving. Like when I watched him do that, and I honestly, like when I was doing High Lonesome, I kept thinking about like how well he moved and how efficient he was at Wasatch, and like how good he looked doing it. And I was like, like what magic sauce do I need to like get on this
I've got a
level,
picture of him at Aunt Knowles. I'll send it to you. You get a kick out of it. It's, you know, it's him and his pacer like being funny for the camera, like hugging each other and like all this sort of stuff. And I'm like, good God, I've never seen someone at the front of a race before, because I've never volunteered this late in a race at an aid station. And so it's great to have someone like that, because he can tell you, he can sort of be like prophetic to you. Like, you will get out of this. You can do this. We've all been here. Everyone who's done a 100-miler has been where you're at. And also we've gotten out of it. I think that's amazing.
Yeah. And I specifically chose pacers who did have like long distance experience, because I also didn't know how I would be feeling through the race. And I was like, I want people who like get it and like aren't going to be upset if I'm quiet or crying or like whatever. So he was like, he was the first one, and he was the best for that job. And then, when we get to Monarch, that's like on the side of the interstate, and it's a Christmas themed aid station, which is like the best thing you've ever experienced. They have like Christmas cookies. Everyone's dressed up. Like,
that's brilliant.
It was so fun. And I went in sobbing. I was so like demoralized, defeated from the night section. I'm like weeping. I'm in a really bad spot. And I wish I remembered his name. One of the aid station like leaders was truly the best person that I've ever met. He like came in and he like fed me pancakes and he was like, so many people have come in here looking worse than you and they leave and they finish and you're going to be fine. And like, we just need to like fix you up and get you something warm to drink and like turn you around and you're going to do great. Like he just like spoke to my soul of like what I needed at that point. And, and
was
really
he dressed like Santa or anything?
He was dressed in like an ugly Christmas sweater. Like most of them are wearing like ugly Christmas sweaters and stuff like that.
So
but it's like fully decked out. It is so fun.
And so he just had the right words for you.
Yeah. And honestly, just like the pep in the step, like everybody there was just so like attentive to the runners and like, and I don't think that there's enough talk around. This was something that kind of came up at Cocodona. That's like a sidebar, but just, I don't think there's enough talk around like what it takes as a pacer, as a crew, as like a volunteer of like the almost being a therapist to your runner and like knowing the right things to say to like keep people going when they're really down and can't see the other side of where they're at. Like I saw that so many times during Cocodona of like all of our friends stepping up to like just pour words and like affirmation into Elsa or like our friends when they needed it. And like that's exactly what people were doing for me too. And like there is so much to be said about people that can just like read the energy and be like, this person needs to hear this right now. Or like, you know, they need a Christmas cookie and they're going to turn it around. Like, I don't know. It's just
that's good.
Such a cool part of doing long distance runs when you see everybody come together to like make sure that this runner crosses that finish line. Yeah. It like gets me really emotional when I think about it. So I picked up my friend Andrea there and she ran with me from Monarch to Fooses, so Fooses Creek, and most of that is on like really pretty single track. You end up on the Colorado Trail, the Colorado Divide, CDT, and it's like perfectly smooth butter, like, you know, so buffed out. It's like a beautiful trail. Can't run it. Like I was that's what I was going to say. Are
you running at this point? Or?
Kind of. It was like a little shuffle, you know. And
are we in like 20 to 25 minute mile pace at this point?
So I would say in my shuffle, I was probably like a 17.
Hey,
like I was trying to do like little jogs in between.
That's awesome.
And it was really funny because Morgan and I were still together at this point, and we both had pacers, and we all know each other, so we were all running together. And I vividly remember Morgan's pacer Rosemary being like, hey, we're gonna do like little intervals here, and I was like, I would rather die. Like I cannot do
how about you
jog.
Just shut up.
Go with your runner. Like leave me alone. But it honestly really helped to like have these little goals of like, okay, like you're gonna hike for a minute and then we're just gonna jog for a minute, and like just kind of doing these little intervals really helped. Like even I think switching up the way I was using my muscles, even though I was having a hard time. Like
that's nice.
My quads hurt, my hip flexors were super sore. Like I just felt really beat up, but they were so great as pacers to kind of get us out of that like funk. And you know, when you're in that consistency, you're like, well, I guess I'm just hiking now for the rest of the race. Like that's just where I'm at. So it was really helpful to have people that were like, no, let's at least try a little bit to like to change the way our gait is and our pace. And so it did help a lot. Yeah. At the time, I didn't feel like it was smart, but I appreciate it now when I look back at it. And you do have like another climb in there that I had done during the scouting session. So there's like a climb up into the trees, and then you kind of descend, and that's before you're about to hit Blank's cabin. So you kind of do there's like 2 climbs in there. They're probably about like 1,200 feet. The first one's probably about a 1,200 foot climb, and the second one's maybe like 800 or 900 feet or something, but they feel so much harder at that point than they would have, you know, like when I did my shakeout, like training thing, I was like, oh, this will be nothing. And then like you get there and you're, you know, 80 miles in and you're just like, this is the hardest thing I've ever done. So, but it's really beautiful and it's all shaded through there. And it's,
that's nice.
Like wildflowers are blooming all across the course. And like, it's just like really, really gorgeous.
And is this early afternoon for you?
Yes.
Late morning,
well, I hit Monarch Pass early in the morning. It was like after sunrise. So I was probably at that aid station at like 6:30 or 7 in the morning. And then when we were kind of going on to like the CDT and that section, it was probably like 10 or 11. And I was hitting some of like the climbs probably around like noon or so. And then I was at Blank's cabin probably around like noon or 1 p.m. And that's like another place you can see crew, which was super helpful. You're 20 miles out, 20 or maybe like 18 or 19 miles away from the finish at that point. Like just seeing friends and being like closer to like where we started and everything, like you start to kind of get a reinvigoration. Even though there's like, you know, still quite a bit left in the race. Like you just feel like, okay, I'm like, it's more attainable at this point. Like I know that it's closer. But it is definitely hard to like be on a part of the race. Like that whole back half of the course after Monarch is very runnable. Like it's all like really beautiful single track. It's really buffed out. It's a lot more friendly, you know, like the course is like it's not rocky and stuff. So it feels like if you're doing it right, you should be able to jog it. But like, I just was not in that space, like as much as I would have liked to be. So I think a big part of my challenge to like the whole race was just like, man, I feel like good enough that I should be able to run. And my legs were just like, no, we don't have that. And then like you hit Blanks and that takes you into Raspberry, which Raspberry is like your first aid station of the race. So then you hit it again at the end. And when you get there, you're like, oh, home stretch. Like, I know this. I was just on this, you know, like yesterday at like 5 a.m. So yeah, you like get there and like your crew's all there and I got my last pacer and I was like, okay, like I can do this. Like it's, you know, so close to the finish. It's 90 miles at Raspberry. And I was like, okay, 10 miles to go. Like it's so attainable. And then you do like one more climb and you're just like, man, this feels so hard. And then you pop out on the same road and your finish line is up on that overlook. So you have to run up the highway, up this big hill, and everyone's like passing you. And like, it is just like, that is one of the most brutal finishes I've ever seen. Like it is this, it's a steep, I think like, I'm trying to think of how much, I mean, it's probably like 1,000-foot climb up the highway. Like you're just on the side of this road and like cars are passing you. Everybody's cheering you on. You're just like, I would rather just like leave my body at this point.
And let me guess, gnarly. Jimmy Elam was, you know, 8-minute miles up that
had a massage, like was already, you know, I'm sure he was like, he was moving. It was amazing. I mean, I didn't see him finish, but I can imagine that he was moving very well. But yeah,
if someone has never run a 100-miler, this is my take on that. I've tried 10 100-milers. I've finished 2, and both of them you get invigorated by that. You're like, oh, it's 10 more miles. My goodness. Even at 20, it's like, oh, just 20 more miles. And then you get out of that aid station, and it's like, oh my God. Oh God. 10 more miles. Like you got the energy. You're kind of let's run this in. And then you run quarter a mile and you're like, oh yeah, no, I can't do that. And so that last 10 can be some of the hardest 10 on your body, clearly, but maybe your mind's not as in a dark of a spot, but then to have a demoralizing final climb, oh
my gosh,
that's crazy.
Well, and it was crazy too, because Morgan and I were still together at that point, and she was having like some knee pain and stuff where she kind of fell back for a while. And then once we got done with like the last climb, you descend on single track until you hit the road. And when we hit the road, I turned around and she was behind me, and I was like not really able to run at that point. And she closed so hard and she was able to like run that whole last section up that road. And I was like, man, I'm so impressed that she had something left in the tank that like I just didn't have. Like I was just not capable to like pull that out at that point.
So admirable to observe that. Yeah,
but like also to like, I don't know, I saw her at her high points during the race and also her really low points. She saw the same for me, and to like see her finish like that, I was so excited. Like, I don't know, being out there, like I really do think, and I'm sure you can relate, that like you just bond so much with people around you during the race like that like I don't know, every person that I got to see finish that I had been around during the race, I felt like emotionally invested in that journey, because you'd just been out there witnessing all of these like ups and downs, and like, will this person make it out of this aid station, or like, wow, they look so good, and then you see them and they end up like having a really bad section or whatever. And like it was really cool to see. And I was like, man, I don't have that left in the tank, and I'm super like impressed to like watch her do that. And her whole crew is just like Caleb was like up at the front, like cheering her on, like they're yelling out their cats' names, like, you've got to do this for Sachi, whatever. And it's like so cool to witness. So yeah.
That bonding piece, that's so much of what like Borderlands is all about, is like, you know, if I'm only getting that, you know, once a year, like it's an effort in recreating elements of that. I had an evolutionary biologist on the podcast who's also a very good friend, and his research was PTSD and ultra running is what he was looking at, and it was looking at two chemicals that I'm not going to be able to remember, I don't think, but it's there's a stress chemical and a bonding chemical that are always sort of like in play with one another, and PTSD. Yeah. So PTSD being like sort of this involuntary suffering that causes it, and ultra running being this voluntary suffering. But in all these cases, like there's this bonding chemical. It's the same chemical that allows a woman to give birth, and like in that moment, it floods their body and allows them to be able to. Well, what he's observed in ultra running is through taking blood tests of runners mid race, is that chemical is heightened, and so the bonding that you feel on a trail is not only because of shared experience, like these things that are tangible, but there's also something firing in us that makes us more apt to bond with each other. And it's just, I absolutely love it.
That's really cool, because I actually have PTSD. I was diagnosed with PTSD like 5-6 years ago. And that was a big part of why I got into trail running in the first place, was I paired that with therapy, and, but it was like very healing for me, very profound to like work through some of my symptoms on the trails. And now that you're saying that, I'm like, wow, I wonder like how much of, you know, the value that I place in those experiences and the things that I feel like connecting with people and like all of this is like part of my healing journey of like why trail has meant so much to me in like recovery and stuff. Because I do feel that, where it's like, you know, I get out there and it's like every, you know, emotion that might have be activated through like having these traumatic responses and stuff. Like mine was always anxiety and like having panic attacks. And even when I was doing that first climb, that big climb that gets you up to the pass, it's like it almost emulates some of those things, where like shortness of breath and things like that, where like it also helps you to navigate how to retrust your body and like retrust that like you're safe, and like having that connection, mind, body, and like physical attachment to where you are. And then also allows you to like further deeper enrich with the people around you. And like that is something that I feel like I'm very aware of when I'm out at races and like doing these hard things, is like the people around me, what they're experiencing, and also like my crew and pacers and stuff, and like how I walk away from these experiences, and I'm like, well, those are like core memories for me now, like things that I'll never replace, and like I'll have this deeper bond with these people that I'm out here with that could never be replaced or honestly emulated in other environments. Like the conversations I've had with friends, the experiences I've had with friends when I'm out there, or like people that I meet on the course, I would never have those conversations typically in like day-to-day life, unless you're just, you know, out there vulnerable, raw for hours and hours and hours and hours, like with nothing else to do. It's one of my favorite things about racing and trail running, and like the training runs that you get into, and you're just like, well, we have no cell service for 4 hours. Like, what are we going to talk about? What are we going to get into? Like, you know, it strips everything away. And I think that's very profound and like super powerful.
I want my friend Alex to write a book. He wants to write a book too at some point, but just of these using ultra running as the control group and studying PTSD. But he talks also like ways that it manifests during the run itself, is like maybe you're drinking a lot of water, but you're not actually peeing. And that's the stress chemical. It's vasopressin. That's what it is. It's so when your vasopressin heightens, it's an antidiuretic. So it thinks that you're dying. And so it keeps all the liquid, everything it can. And then at night when you cool off and you've given up on, at least, you know, us mid back of the packers, we've given up on our times, whatever. And we're fine with walking for a handful of miles. And all of a sudden we have this release of like the other chemical that causes us to feel like we can do it, feel like we can keep going forward. And then, you know, it's also, we can finally pee again.
That's so interesting.
It is. And so, it was just really nice to be able to put some sort of like scientific stuff to that bonding that I feel. I'm introverted. I don't make a ton of friends, but I am so chatty in a 100-miler. Like, I love to get to know new people on that. So I know we deviated a little bit.
Too. No, but I love that though, because I feel like that is a big part of like my journey too, of like why I love trails so much, why I'm in so many communities, why I formed community was because of like, you know, like the healing that I feel like it brings to people, and also like the tap into like what we're capable of, and like, you know, when you get everything stripped away, like who are you really, like what are you down below that, like what drives you, how do you treat people when you're in your lowest parts, and like how do people receive and accept you when you're not, I don't know, 100% on all the time. Like I just think there's really beautiful things that we uncover from doing these things, and something that I've talked a lot about recently around running, and specifically like ultra distances, like 50-mile plus, I think, is how like in society today, it's so easy for all of us just to be like super comfortable and like not have to get uncomfortable. And for the niche group of us that seek out discomfort to learn about ourselves, I think that's a really beautiful thing, to allow ourselves to be in spaces that push us to our breaking points, our limits, to unearth like who are we really, and like how can we grow as people in this space, and like we don't have to. And I think that's, I mean, something that you kind of touched on with the PTSD conversation too, is like, like a lot of us come to this space because we've experienced other kinds of like pain or turmoil or discomfort in life. And then we use that as a channel to say, well, I've experienced harder than this, worse than this, longer than this, you know, like I'm capable of doing this thing because I felt worse. And that wasn't my choice, but this is. And I think that's really powerful to do too.
Yeah. And you know, I've met so many people on the trail that are, you know, in recovery from various addictions and also in them. And you know, I think it helps me see things in a positive sense, in that, you know, people say like, you know, I've got an addictive personality, I can't do this, I can't do that. But in they're trading that, maybe the negative addiction for, let's call ultra running a positive addiction, even though sometimes we can push ourselves too far.
Sure.
That there's like this intensity that we have. And I love that when we can take that intensity and place it into these ultra things that we do, it's a great place to put that intensity. I just really love.
I think so too. And that's something that because I would say like, I probably also have an addictive personality. I think most of us do. Like I think I have a very type A personality where I love structure. I love a training plan. I want to build towards something, and that can be a fixation for sure. And I feel like, this provides me with like a positive outlet where it's like, you know, it's something that's going to help me grow as a person. And then in turn, that also helps me in my day-to-day life. It helps me handle stress better. It helps me navigate work better. I know what I'm capable of. And like, I don't know. I just think there's so many ways that like trail running, like translates to life in so many positive ways, of like how it helps us to be more durable, be more innovative. We pivot better. There's so many things.
All right. Two final questions.
Yeah.
One, High Lonesome as a first 100-miler. I mean, everybody's different. I'm just curious for you. Are you happy with that choice as being your first? Is it that thing that we just talked about, in that now that you've done among the hardest that's out there, and you've chosen Wasatch as your second one, which isn't as high in elevation, but is as much gain. I mean, for anyone listening, I mean, it's a harder race to get into than it used to be.
Yeah.
There's other races. One that comes to mind is Devil's Gulch in Washington. It's 24,000 feet of gain. It's alpine. You know, there's other races of that profile, but as your first 100-miler, tell me your thoughts on, do you recommend it as a first 100-miler, or do you wish you had done, you know, something easier? I think I know the answer, but what do you think?
Yeah, no, I don't wish I had done something easier. I think it was exactly what I needed it to be. And maybe not what I expected or like wanted, quote unquote, wanted it to be, but it was what I needed. And like, I genuinely feel like that is the most beautiful course. The structure, the organization, the race directing, like everything is so top notch that like from all of the like check boxes that you'd want from a 100-miler, I think it hits all of those, but then I think it like gives you so much in return. And like I put my name on the list again this year, and I was like top of the wait list. I could have done it again, and I want to do it again. So like that should also be a testament of like, I want to go back and like do that course again now that I'm much healthier and like able to train the way that I want to train, that I like want to go back and like experience it, especially knowing the course again too. I think there's a lot to be said about ripping the Band-Aid off and like going and experiencing it, so that if you do decide you want to do it again, you like know what's coming, so that you could train a little better, or like, you know, what to expect through the nighttime and all of that too would go a long way. But I will say, like, it is a burly race. It is, you know, when you think like, I knew it was going to be hard, and it was harder than I could have wrapped my brain around at the time. So I would definitely just like, prepare to be very uncomfortable for a long time. But also, you know, that, like you are capable of more than potentially you think at any given time during that race. Like the ups and downs are real, but like you are capable of so much. And like that whole entity, the race organization, every volunteer is there to like get you across the finish line. Like, and I feel that from every single person that shows up at those aid stations. Their only goal is to like help you achieve your goal. And like, that is really powerful. Like nobody's standing by just like watching. Everyone is so involved. They're like constantly, they're like, what do you need? How can we help you? What's going to get you to that goal? So I would say like, depending on your preference, if you like a runnable course, I would say maybe not. But like, I truly think that like, that is a top notch 100-miler. And like, it is, I mean, right now it's like my number one A+ like race, you know, like it was the best 100-miler experience for me, even though it was really hard and painful. I think it gave me what I was looking for. And so, that's awesome. It taught me a lot.
Well, based off everything you said, I did an episode about that it hasn't released yet on the Wasatch 100 with a woman named Emma Giebler. And you'd love her. I think she's actually doing High Lonesome this year. Her first.
Oh my gosh, we're trade off.
Yeah, her first 100 was Leadville. She DNF'd it twice, then she got it the third time. Then she's finished Wasatch 3 times, and now she's going to, I think it is High Lonesome.
Amazing.
But you'll love her story. I was at Aunt Knowles. She comes in and literally like she's laying on the ground. We weren't certain if we're gonna have to get a helicopter in, and then she gets up and finishes the race with 3 minutes to spare. Just a phenomenal story. But our conversation was very similar to that one, and it sounds like similar DNA. It's just you know, the best people are behind this race, and you know, they're, you know, championing this sport in a grassroots way. That's just incredible. But final question, I get question observation. I'm seeing NAC everywhere, and I see that you recently started working for NAC. What is it? I mean, it's food or something?
Yeah. So I started as the North American Partnership Manager for NAC. They are an endurance-focused nutrition company based out of Montreal. But they're hyper-focused on trail and ultra distances, which is perfect for this conversation because, they really shine around, I mean, anything over like 4 hours. But to me, like, you know, 100K, 50-miler, 100-miler, 200-miler, like their nutrition is so spot on for that. And I've been using like all of their they have like an ultra energy drink mix and the purees religiously. But they're hyper focused on like palatable flavors that you can use for a long time without, you know, getting palate fatigue, and a complete nutrition profile across all of the products that they offer. So we partner a lot, or like we've innovated a lot with our pro athletes on all of the products that we offer. And so I've felt very, very lucky to be able to kind of merge, you know, like my passion for trail running, my passion for community, also with nutrition, which is something we all need when we're racing. So I feel like I actually get to like give people something that they actually are looking for and that they need when they're out there on a course. But I've been lucky enough to like get to travel for work more now, at a lot of the different races that, you know, we're involved with and sponsoring. So I'm seeing a lot of race courses. I'm seeing a lot of people's experiences, and it allows me to have like even more perspective on the community, which I love.
What's the next race that you'll be at?
So I'm racing Scout Mountain 50K in 2 weeks. So I'll be there in that capacity. And then I go to Western States to support 3 of our athletes that are racing. So that's a part of my job also, is to just like be there for support crew for our NAC athletes. And then after that, I'll be at Speed Goat. So I'll be there like sampling and demoing NAC products and like doing stuff with our athletes leading up to Speed Goat as well. And then I'm doing Tesher 70K. So it's like it's like all back to back to back all the time.
That's fun. Well, right on. Well, Bri, thanks for joining me today. This is a fun conversation. And
thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, appreciate everything you do in the community. I mean, clearly we touched on it there in the end, just as a community builder. It's cool to see what you're up to out there. And so thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate it so much.
Yeah.